Awesome. So, talk is about building a UI framework for a large-scale application. A little bit about me. I am a user interface developer. I am a part-time designer and user experience consultant. And I pretend on my spare time to be a UI architect. I've worked with different clients. Some of my clients are listed here. What I want to talk about today is a project that I'm working on for the last client I have, which is Ultrasource Labs. And how we're taking Angular and building a big suite of applications with it. So before I get started on the actual application and what we're doing with it, I just want to clarify on some of the things, some of the terminologies that I'm going to use. And for one thing, I want to talk about what it means to build a UI framework. So to me, a UI framework takes the three prongs of UI, which is JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, and puts it together. So we do have JavaScript, and we're not really trying to reinvent the wheel here. So we're using any model view, whatever framework that you think of, we can use that. HTML, the basic rule is keep it semantic and try to use the best HTML5 abilities that you can. With CSS, we're doing a direct translation of design into our CSS. We're using tools like Sass or Less. And if any of you know, the only one on that list that matters to me is Sass. I'm writing a book on advanced Sass techniques, so I don't do Less. And then we're building a style guide with it. There are some other tools that we're using, Grunt being the major one. Yeoman, we use Yeoman for scaffolding, and we've actually created our own what we call a real suite scaffold, where you can just with a push of a button, you can create the scaffolding that you need to start your application. We're looking at using Bower for our package management. And I may get into a little bit more of that as we go along. The current problem that we're trying to tackle is that we have multiple products that have been built as siloed products. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a suite of products and bring all those products in to be sold as a suite of products. Think of it as Adobe, a creative suite. You can go out there and buy Photoshop and Illustrator by itself, but you can also buy the suite of products, and that's kind of what we're trying to emulate. And what we're trying to also have is a unified look and feel. The original tech stack, well, actually there wasn't really a unified tech stack at all. The technologies that were used were XJS on some products, Backbone on some, Backbone and Marionette on others, and you can go as far back as Progress. You guys know what Progress is? The old Windows, yeah. I wouldn't raise my hand if I were you. And we didn't have a clear design. All these products look very different from each other. Now the current stack that we're going towards is, that's the only one I put up there, Angularjs. That kind of met all the needs that we had in all the areas. Where we were using jQuery UI to build widgets, we're now using AngularJS. Where we were using Backbone and Marionette to build a framework, we're now using AngularJS. So AngularJS was pretty much a good godsend for us to use. The goals, like I said, we wanted to have a unified design. We wanted to have reusable components. We wanted to have other groups, other products, be able to build a component, a widget, a service of any kind, and be able to contribute it back to the framework. we wanted to have a strict and good coding standards, and we wanted to have a way to broadcast how to consume the code, the widgets, or the service that were being created, whether it was by the framework or by other groups. All these things that you see here can be done with other frameworks, but Angular handled it much better. When I first started on this project, I didn't have much experience with Angular, and I actually was hired to build a backbone application. So I built it using Backbone Marionette. For the first 3 months, I built it, and there were some calls for us to use Angular. There were some people who were whispering that they wanted to use Angular, and I didn't mind learning Angular in other people's dime, but I just didn't feel comfortable enough to build a framework on top of it. They finally kind of persuaded me, and I said, okay, I talked to my boss, and I said, give me a week, let me look at it, and I'll let you know. After a week of going through all the YouTubes and all the blogs that I could read and going through Angular's tutorial, I came back and I said, yeah, let's do it, because what I was doing with Backbone Marionette and jQuery UI in order to build a widget, with Angular, I was able to do it much easier. So I was pretty happy to do that. And luckily for me, they accepted. So being a UI architect has some pros and has its cons. One of the pros is, well, you sort of get to make all these decisions. You are a benevolent dictator. Actually, that's depending on who you ask. Some people you ask, you are just a dictator. I'm that guy with the drumming. That's me, the architect. And truth is, as an architect, we don't want to be that. We actually want to be this. I'll let you guys take a minute to absorb. All right. Essentially, what I want to say is we want everybody to sort of have a kumbaya attitude towards what we're trying to do. But it is very hard to do. As a benevolent dictator, you have to make some edicts. And I'm going to go through some of the unpopular ones that I've made. So one of the edicts that I made was we're not using any Bootstrap or Foundation CSS. No third-party plugins, which if you combine this edict with the previous one means no Angular UI. Majority of components are made in-house. So there's reasons behind these decisions. One is it's right here. So this is one of the projects that I worked on a while back. And what they're using here is Foundation CSS. And one of the first things that they came to me with a problem is that if you look at the carousel up there, you'll see that as it transitions from one image to another, the text changes, but it stays put. And they wanted that fix. It's like, we don't like that. It's like, all right. So I looked through Foundation's JavaScript and CSS, and basically the way it was set up, this is the best you could do with it. So that, that reliance on something like this was hard to remove from an entire product. Another example is the ever popular ng-grid. It's a great product. It's a great widget. If you want to build a grid, it works great. After looking at the code a little bit, I had a few problems with it. One problem I had was that if you're building tabular data, I think you should take, going back to the HTMLs and the semantic writing of HTML, I think tabular data should be in the table. These are all built by divs and absolute position divs too. Had a little trouble trying to use that, justifying to use it. So there are things like this that sort of came about giving out these edicts. Usually when any of these things that I've listed over here, when I tell people, I get different reactions. This is one of them. Another reaction is this. I end up getting this reaction, that's me. But I get different reactions when I tell people no Bootstrap, no Foundation, or no third party. There is a method to that madness. And so what we want to be able to is be able to implement our design. And when you use Bootstrap or Foundation as your CSS, but when the design comes to you and you start building a button, you start out with Bootstrap's button, right? And it's not always the button you want it to look like. Well, you either have to spend time building classes to override Bootstrap's inherent button, or you have to actually go into Bootstrap and change the button code. Why the first one, by creating all these overriding classes, well, you're just simply adding bloat to your CSS, unnecessary bloat in my opinion. The second option, which is going in there and changing Bootstrap's code, well, now you're totally disconnected from Bootstrap. And if you want to use future versions of Bootstrap as reliance, as some starting point, you're not going to be able to do that. We want to be able to to create widgets and components and services that can satisfy multitude of products and their requirements. If I use ngGrid as my starting point, has anybody ever taken a look at ngGrid's code? It's quite hefty and cumbersome. And trying to modify that to meet your need is in my opinion, much more expensive than just building one. Now, I'm not totally against borrowing code, stealing, borrowing, whatever you want to call it. I'm not against that. I'm not entirely against bringing in ngGrid either, but I'm more in favor of looking at the code and seeing what you can use. When it comes to Foundation and Bootstrap, I use their grid layout all the time. I have no trouble using that. But some of the other areas, I don't feel a need for. We want to be able to update the widgets, whether they're custom or third party, to meet our need. And that's the crux of the issue. So what we try to do is build a base for our widgets. If our goal is to build tables to display tabular data, well, why not start from a simple table and then build on top of it? Building a simple table with sorting doesn't take that hard. It took me a week to do. Filtering could be added on top of that. Grouping could be added on top of that, and so on. And it adds the aspect of familiarity. Yes?
So, it seems to be if you're working on a project where the app has a bunch of different technology, then going and customizing everything so that design can execute perfectly makes all the sense in the world. And then when you're trying to get something up and going for less than 10 grand in less than 2 months, to spend a week building out a custom grid system is a big deal. What would you say the tipping point is between because you're right, as soon as you start using other tools, using Foundation, you're going to have to probably compromise the design somewhere, to shoehorn it into Foundation. But you don't have the time to have custom design. So where do you draw that line between Foundation is good enough for one versus really thinking yourself out?
So the question is, where's the line, right? That's up to you and your product managers or your product owners. If they are willing to if the idea is to get a minimum viable product out, right? And Bootstrap will do. I have no trouble with that. But when you're, in my case, the decisions that we made was because we're building a large scale application that we want extensible and we want performance. We don't want it bloated. We want everything around the aspect of that justifies you building a customized version of it. A small, like, to me, I have no trouble using Bootstrap in a prototype. Small application. I have a client comes to me and says, I want a website out and I want it done in 2 weeks. I have no trouble using that. It's very dependent on the project itself. I don't know if I answered it, but we can definitely talk later. So let's talk a little bit about AngularJS development. So I have developers in India, Romania, Atlanta, and Boston, all trying to work on AngularJS. And you can't get one developer to agree on, two developers to agree on the same thing. To me, it's exactly like herding cats. And that's where the edicts come into play. Most decisions, if you're lucky, 50% of people agree with you and 50% disagree with you. So most decisions that you're going to make 50% of the people unhappy. So AngularJS development with a bunch of developers requires you to have strict coding standards, and that's what we're trying to establish. The first thing that we needed to do was have file organization. And looking out on the web, there's the best practices for large-scale applications are a little bit missing. Most of the information that you see are overviews and things like that. And I gathered some of this information by doing a lot of research. So what we want to do is we want to keep our files organized. We want, I didn't see very many good examples for large-scale application organization, and most tutorials skimmed over best practices. So some of the things that I saw over about file organization were different. This is the example of AngularC, the way AngularC does it, which is they create an app.js, controller.js, directive.js, filters, and services. And what it means, basically, they put all those related items in there. I didn't feel like that would meet our need at all. Actually, I don't feel like this meets any product's need. Because when I work on a project, no matter how small it is, I am betting on the fact that it's going to be successful and it's going to grow. So I'm always building it with the idea that it's going to be bigger than God. Batarang does this, the sock drawer, which basically what they do is they create a controller folder, directive folder, filters, and services, and they just put all the socks in those drawers. That, again, could be okay for a medium application, but not for what we were doing. And what we ended up going with was a modularity approach, which is what we were doing is we took a module of any kind, whether it be a service, whether it be a standalone widget, or whether it be an application of any kind. And we put those in a module by itself. In this case, you'll see they have notes, and they have a controller, a model, and a service in there. This information I got from, there's a good GitHub site out there. I'll share this slide with you so you guys can get that information. Now, how do we do our AngularJS implementation? How do we wanted to take full advantage of all the AngularJS features, which means when to use directives, when to use services, controllers, routes, config, and constants. All the widgets, all the applications, everything that we create, we put in a module. We consider everything a module. So if I create, for example, I have an infinite scroll service that I'm creating. That is considered a module by itself. I am creating a header for my for the site. That is considered a module by itself. So we're putting everything contained within that module. Now the module can be a service, like I said, or it can be a standalone widget also. Like a data grid or a date picker. We're doing what I call the turducken pattern, which is we put directives within directives. There's no such thing as a turducken pattern, I just made that up. But we put directives within directives, and I am going to test this out to its nth degree, which means, for example, I'm going to create for a page, I'm going to create a page layout directive called 2-column layout, something like that. And in that 2-column layout, I'm going to put all the widgets that I want to put in each of those columns. So I am going to sort of, like I said, take this to the nth degree to see how far I can take it until it breaks down on me. Haven't done it yet, but that's my goal. We've also set some implementation rules. So, for example, for directives, the majority of HTML would be contained in directives. I can't think of anything right now other than a simple declaration of your div that will not be in a directive. Most of the widgets, most of the, just anything you can think of would probably be, can be contained within a directive. Well, so our goal, why would I want, so the question is, why do I want the overhead of a directive? Our goal is to build reusable widgets. There's very few things I can think of that's not reusable on a site. And even if it's not reusable and it's pertaining to a specific application, I have no trouble. I don't see the huge overhead of directives versus just putting it straight in the HTML. I may be wrong. Yes. I'm going to talk about that. Services. The abstraction is a key. I had a 30-minute discussion with the developer who was trying to do infinite scroll, and he was telling me, oh, it's only 2 lines of code. Why do I need to put it in the service? And my point was, well, you're not the only one who's going to be doing infinite scroll. And even if we put it in a, for example, data grid widget, what about if we want to put it in another container and we want to use that as a service? So we had this discussion, and we finally, hopefully, I think we agreed on that it's going to be a service. We wanted to make sure that we use all the tools that come with the service. We wanted to make sure that you know when to use a factory, when to actually use a service, and when to use a provider. I can go on about this discussion, and maybe if I have time later on, I'll talk about it a little bit. Other implementation rules. So templates, you asked. All of our templates are in a JS file and accessible to a global variable. Now, this is something that I brought over from Backbone when I did Backbone implementation. And the reason I did this was because, like I said, we want to be able to not only have self-containing widgets, but we want to be able to sort of concatenate them, minify them, put them together, and people should be able to use them. With an HTML template, I wasn't able to do that, or I couldn't figure out how. Yes?
There are tests, and probably dump tests at this point as well, that can take HTML files and then create the bundle them. The compile script, I think.
And where does it put it? Does it put it in a JS file?
So if you look at the minified source for all of the, I think it's the UI Bootstrap stuff.
Okay.
That's how they end up compiling up.
Great. That's good to know. Yes.
Another technique you can use is the script angle terminal tile, something like that, exactly. And you give it a path, and you can basically, preferably using buttons, something like that, you can add an HTML file into a log HTML file with some script tags,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be HTML minified at the top. And that, in that case, instead of loading the request, it sees it's already been defined with the script tag and does that.
So you put the script tag in your application then?
Inside of the HTML page. So imagine you have a single HTML page that you load, you can have all the templates being embedded in there, or better to a degree that you want to be embedded. And you can do that using something like that. My preference would be to use a kind of an automated tool to help put something like that together for purposes of communication, as opposed to encumbering the development process, in my opinion, of editing HTML within the JavaScript files and all.
I've heard that argument before, and I understand. But the reason we did this was because we wanted to be able to minify, concatenate, put it in there and put it in Bower, so that when you wanted, for example, the header, you would get everything with it, all the dependencies, and just one call to a JS file. To me, that justified modifying in a JS file. So yeah, but that was the reasoning behind doing it this way. More implementation rules. Filters is another level of abstraction that you can do, and one of the things that we tried to, like, for example, the other day I looked up something, and people were using filters to build CSS classes for ng class, which I thought was pretty cool and creative. I forgot to put that code in here, but I can send that out later. I thought it was pretty interesting. The usages could be just regular formatting, filtering, and sorting. And don't forget about using proper usage of config, constant, and run. So, coding conventions. We definitely wanted people to follow a unified naming convention. That was key for us in not only to be able to minify the widgets, but also in versioning. We wanted to be able to put out different versions of the same file and allow different products to use different versions based on their needs. Like I said, ability to package each widgets, and we took full advantage of Yeoman for scaffolding and Bower for package management. One of the weaknesses that Bower has is that it looks for a public Git site, so anything that you create, you have to kind of put it on a public Git site, and we wanted to keep it private, so we were running into some issues with that. I've seen a couple of articles about how to create your own private Bower, which we're definitely looking into building. There's some excellent best practices out there. I found one on Quora the other day about somebody asked a really good question, or some of the time savings tips every AngularJS user should know. This guy Shyam came up with a really, really good set of rules. This video by Miska is pretty good. I'm not going to run that. And I think the Angular group came out with some good recommendations for app structures that I would highly recommend. So there's a lot more. This is where we are so far. We're learning quite a bit, and maybe 6 months down the line, if you ping me and ask me how are things going, I may tell you that we did everything differently than what I just told you. But this is the path that we're going down, and we're trying to build a proper large-scale application with it. A few of the concerns that I have are scope management. I'm very concerned about the amount of data that we may display and the amount of data that will be put in the actual scope and the performance of dirty checking that happens with that. We are looking to do a lot of logging and a lot of unit testing to ensure that everything that we create follows proper methodology and the package management issue that I mentioned. So our goal is that under the framework, we're going to create these individual widgets that people can simply using something like Bower and, I hate to say this, maybe Maven, to bring it into your product and start using it. It is something that we're really working on and trying to perfect so that people can use this unified set of code. And that's it for me. Any questions? Yes. I am working on getting our people not to support IE8. I don't know if you guys know, but Microsoft is discontinuing support of Windows XP, which is the last living area of IE8, and most of the people who are worried about security are going to move away from that. So.
I got 65% of our customers are on IE8, so it's not really us. We've been running into a lot of.
But you don't think those 65% it's going to go down dramatically after April?
It's healthcare, and they move really slowly, so I don't know.
I don't know. I've worked with a lot of banks, and they work slowly too. But when it comes to security, I think they move faster. But I may be wrong. As far as IE8 is concerned and support, no, I don't think I have a good answer for you.
Just wondering, I was just looking for ideas for cross-browser testing and trying to
Well, where is it? Is it Angular issues or is it CSS issues?
well, but we run into some Angular issues, things like edicts not working reliably, and a whole host of things.
Really, yeah.
And pretty much everywhere I read, the solution is just don't support anything. My boss told me it's not a solution.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Thoughts on localization? Yes. So one of the things that we were trying to do with localization and sort of our validation and error messaging was that we were going to share properties files with our servers, and we're going to create a grunt task that will take those properties files and change them into TXT files and sort of bring them in to our client and use them accordingly. We don't have, we're not very much text-based. We get most of our information that's displayed on the page from the server. So any internalization, IE8N information that comes in, it comes from the server. I don't have, I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for that. Yes?
How much like unit testing and what testing do you do, and what are some of the most fruitful areas that you found you like development and not so fruitful areas?
Fruitful areas as far as unit testing, what do you mean? By tools, or you mean getting developers to unit test?
Well, as far as like
So our goal is to have to go towards test-driven development, and if we manage to do that, great. But if we don't, our ultimate goal is everything is going to have unit tests associated to it. So if we create a widget, it's going to have unit tests associated with it. I don't prescribe to it takes too much time to write tests. I don't agree with that. I think testing, I've written unit tests for most everything I've done, and it saved me a lot of time in regression testing. Problem is some people write unit tests for functionality versus the actual unit test. If you create, for example, a widget for a header, all you need to know is whether that header exists and some of the sub-menus, if you have sub-menus and all that stuff, exist, and if you've built it correctly. Functional testing is something different that comes with whether when you click on a menu, you get the sub-menus, and what are in those sub-menus. So those are different things. What we're looking at is we're going to use Jasmine and Karma for our unit tests, and we're going to use Protractor for our functional tests. I know Angular has or used to have the E2, it was called E2E, but they actually on their site recommend Protractor. So that's what we're going to do. Yes, sir. If we're not using Angular UI or we're using ng router. I think most of my, the answer is most of the time, I mean, how can a lot of people concentrate on, and I don't mean this to you, but a lot of people concentrate on the fact that you're not using third-party plugins. So I always have to rephrase this: is that I'm not against using them. I'm for copying the code. I'm all about stealing. Call me a thief. Call me whatever. I'm all about stealing the code. I just don't need the styling that comes with it and all that stuff. So one of the things that, for example, we did is we created a service for our REST calls, and we wrapped REST Angular. We created our service as a wrapper to REST Angular, and we added on top of that the extra features that we need, which one was caching. We wanted when we make a REST call to cache some of the information, so we don't have to continuously make those calls. So we put a wrapper around REST Angular. I don't have any problem bringing ng router in. Most of the other stuff, we built an accordion, for example. Let me see if I have this up. Yeah, so this is part of our site, and this accordion that you see, we built. But 80% of the code we got out of Angular UI. We just skipped the HTML, the CSS, and stuff that came along with it. I don't have a problem doing that. The other hesitation that I have is when I use somebody else's code, I want to know that code so that if I need to make changes to it, I want to be able to do that. A lot of people, when they use other people's code, they don't look into it, and it promotes a bit of laziness, in my opinion, because later on, when you want to make some modifications, you're going to have a very hard time doing it. So that's why if it feels like a very dictatorial rule of no third party, it's not that. It's a little bit more lenient, but it feels like that. I interviewed the guy the other day. We were talking about Ajax calls, and I told him, tell me what you know about Ajax calls. How would you make one? And he told me $.ajax. It's like, all right, that's good. Let's pretend we don't have jQuery. How would you do that? And he couldn't answer. I love jQuery. I love it as a framework, but I think UI developers need to know what's underneath it. it shouldn't be. I'm just going to call it $Ajax, and that should be done. So that's kind of the reason behind this stuff. So this grid over here is not done, but this is sort of, I built it from scratch because I needed it. Yes?
How did you test your code?
Briefly. Well, so it's showing and hiding a div, right? So, but I think that mostly comes under functional testing, in my opinion. So to me, when I create an accordion, if I'm going to do unit testing, I'm looking at whether when I put title 1, I see title 1, and the content of that first accordion is there. So those are some of the basics of the unit testing. With functional testing, yes, I will fire the click event, and I would look for that div that contains the content exists and it's available. And I think you just stumped me there. I don't know how I would do that. If anybody knows, that'd be great. Yes.
So not any of the new NGM stuff? Or?
No, not yet. Yes, sir.
How important do you think responsive web design is to creating the UI?
Depends on what your clientele is. I mean, if you want people to be using your site from a phone, and I'm a big fan of mobile first. A lot of the stuff that I do start from mobile first. Fortunately, I've had large-scale applications like this that they've told me they don't care about mobile right now. But to me, if you feel like you're going to support mobile, you should do it from the very beginning and not wait till the end. Mobile first, in my opinion, is a lot easier than mobile last. So. Yes.
So how large was this? And implemented things like roles and
Currently, right now, our code base, we are in the second month of development for it, so it's not that big. I'll be happy to show you some of the things. So here's our, for example, the header that I keep talking about is, guys, so here's our header. We create the module by itself. We have the directive and our template. That simply builds our header for us. Right now, it's not doing anything ecstatically fancy. All it is essentially putting. So with each module that we create, we're adding it within this code base area. What was your second part of your question? It's a pretty good one. Role-based, yes. So we do have role-based. Pretty much our entire site is role-based, and what we're doing is we're creating a service that you call initially upon load of the application, which gets that and caches it for you, and then all the widgets and all the for example, the header. We're not showing the entire header. We're showing certain menus to certain users. They're just consuming that. So we just inject that service in there, and they start using it. Yes. Yeah, so why did we choose Angular, and what else did we consider? So like I said, I was brought in because I had Backbone experience, so I built a beginning of a framework with Backbone and Marionette. Marionette is pretty good in the sense that it allows you to create modules and submodules. So it was doing a pretty decent job, and combining that with jQuery UI, we were able to create most of our widgets that you see here and continue with them. The reason we moved to Angular was because all the things that we were doing with Backbone, Marionette, and all that was being done very, very much easier with Angular. I've done projects in Knockout.js also. I do love Knockout.js, two-way binding. Same reason I like Angular, but Knockout also falls short a little bit. I do like Angular because it looks at the frameworks and looks at UI differently, and I think it's a good thing for our community. Yes. One pain point that I'm very concerned about, I remember, is scope management. I'm very concerned about that. Pain points. The learning curve was a little hard, but I liked it. And the other pain point is a lot of blogs and tutorials are very basic overviews of stuff, and you just need more information on large-scale applications. And hopefully, one of these days, with my experience, I might blog all this stuff out, and so that other people can use. But yeah. Yes, sir.
We went kind of whole hog and went straight for it to router as a, not a router, UI router.
Right.
So we didn't really use any router so much, and because we had some sections, with selections inside and subsections and things like that as far as architecture went. So I'm wondering, with the routing scale, if you found pain points with regular entry routing, bundled with Angular, and you found issues where it doesn't scale so well, or that it actually worked pretty well?
No, we're planning on using. You said ngRouter comes with Angular, or ngRouter is an add-on, right? I thought ngRouter was an add-on, kind of like ngAnimate is a. Right. I haven't gotten that far yet. That's one of the other things that we're going to do, because right now we're creating widgets and I'm just dumping it on a page. I'm not. I haven't. Yeah. Bring me back in 6 months and maybe we'll go through routing. Yes. It's under Manning. It's called SAS in Depth. I can tweet that out, and you guys can take a look at it. Well, that's it. Well, thank you.